I'm Michael, and I'm here to talk to you about how to play the Digimon trading card game, as it is something that I have recently come to really enjoy playing, really enjoy collecting, and want to spread and enjoy with more and more people. So, to begin with, I want to talk about the individual parts of the card, and then from there I will go into a kind of demonstration of how the field lays out and kind of basically walk through how a turn works and how winning the game works. So to start out, we look at what we have here. We have our essentially 4 different types of cards. We have our Digi-Eggs, or Digitama. We have our Digimon. We have our Tamer cards down here. And then we have our option cards. So the primary goal of the game is to attack your opponent with your Digimon cards. So what do we have here is, like, this is our Digitama. They are part of a separate deck that we have, because we have 2 decks in this game. We have one 0 to 5 Digi-Egg deck, and we have one 50 card deck that we play with. This is a Digitama. These go in our 0 to 5 card Digi-Egg deck, and they can't attack, they can't block, they can't be in the primary battle zone of our playfield by any normal use of the rules of the game. And all they're there for is to basically have a body that you can digivolve onto and to provide what's called an inherited effect to the Digimon that you did digivolve into. And so, looking at this, like, this Koromon right here is just a level 2, and it's got this inherited effect down here that talks about different things about when you attack with this Digimon and stuff like that. So what those effects, what these inherited effects are, is essentially a added text box when you digivolve into the next form. So if I digivolve this Agumon onto that Koromon, it would then add whatever was in the text box down there on the Koromon to his text box. So all this text here is the rules of what that card does and how that card works. So the more important thing to immediately worry about is this is the DP value. That's the digital power, that's the value that you use to determine whose Digimon wins in a fight if you have 2 Digimon fighting each other. Yours or your opponent's, whoever has the higher DP value wins the fight. It's kind of straightforward there. Digimon's a pretty clear-cut game. You can look at these cards and see that reading the card explains the card, and typically in TCGs we use that phrase a little more sarcastically, but in the case of Digimon, it truly is the case. Reading the card explains the card, as they do a great job of making it nice, easy to understand, easy to look at, clean. They flat out say play cost, digivolve cost, on play, inherited effect. Everything's clear and obvious what it's talking about, where it is, and how it goes. And that makes it just a little bit easier to understand the game and a little bit easier to understand what the rule's trying to say when you're just trying to read it, or you're watching and trying to follow along to see how it works. And so here we go with what each of these things are. You have the play cost. That's what you cost to play it straight to the battlefield, from your hand to the field, not worrying about any other steps, no digivolving, no nothing. You just hard play this card. That's how much it costs. It costs you 3 memory. And I'll go into more on what memory is and how that's our resource in this game and how turns work after I go through the card description, demonstrate on a kind of laid out playmat with how the game works there in turn structure. The other cost here is digivolve cost. It's the cost if you digivolve it. It also tells you the digivolve requirements. You can only digivolve this card onto a red level 2, but it costs you nothing to do it. And that's what this little indicator does. The circle, the color of it tells you what it has to digivolve onto. It tells you the level right here for the Digimon. So this, you check this number here to make sure it matches up. And it only costs you 0 memory for this particular one. If I were digivolving this Greymon, it would cost me 2 to place it on a red level 3. And so you just look at the card there, look at that little bubble there, and it'll tell you exactly what you need to know. You go down here, you've got the rules text. This card says on play. That means that you have to play it using this cost here. It means you played it straight to the field, you didn't digivolve it, and then you get that effect. That effect resolves. This one here says when digivolving. So if you place it on top of a level 3 by paying 2 right here, then you get this ability here. And so on and so forth. The card's kind of straightforward, say that. That's the difference between on play and when digivolving. And on play means you're playing it straight from your hand to the battlefield. A when digivolving means you're playing it on top of another Digimon for its digivolve cost. Your turn versus opponent's turn. Like this card says, it's pretty straightforward too. You know, the your turn effect applies during your turn. The opponent's turn effect applies during their turn. So, going back to that Koromon, this inherited effect says when attacking. So that means that when you declare an attack with that Digimon, that happens. And it also says once per turn. Like it says, this ability only happens once. There are ways to unsuspend your Digimon and attack them multiple times. Some Digimon play that as the go-to strategy. Basically, they untap themselves and attack and attack and attack and attack. And that's the goal of the deck, is to see how many times you can swing that one Digimon in a turn. This effect only applies once. That's why, and it specifies that clearly here. It's got different color indicator like boxes around it. So your keyword things like draw one here have a different color little scheme, and that's one of them. You've got this other one called blocker, which is a little nice and clear. All these keywords like this, blocker, retaliation, rush, all of these will have this nice beautiful block of text in parentheses that's called reminder text. It tells you what that means, and which is nice and easy to do. Blocker is kind of relevant to understand because it is the only ability that kind of protects you from your opponent's Digimon and their attacks. So blocker says when an opponent's Digimon attacks, you may suspend this Digimon to force the opponent to attack it instead. The majority of the time, an attack is declared at you as a player, and you can't really do anything about it except resolve effects and check your security. Blocker is basically the only way to prevent that from happening. To basically have a secondary out to what's going on, without having to rely on your security or your out of security. And we'll go more into what security is during the example at the end. So there's a couple other things on these cards. You have your stage level, your attribute, and your type. These are effects that are relevant based on card text with it. Rules text on the card, and so it's a more in-depth, kind of not really the purpose of this video, not relevant, but potentially a future video if people want to know. And that basically covers the gist of what's important on the individual Digimon cards themselves. So then you have your tamer cards. Your tamer cards are a little bit different than Digimon. They sit in your play area the same as your Digimon do, but they don't, you can't attack with them, you can't really do anything like that. Different tamers have different abilities. They're just kind of chilling there on the field and may or may not do something. For example, this one has a start of your turn effect, so when the turn passes from your opponent to you, this effect occurs, it checks to see if the condition's met, and then it applies. And it has a your turn effect that also applies as long as it's your turn. and they just sit there and do their effects as need be. So they also, and then down here you have what's called a security effect. Now if a card has this little thing saying security, that means that if that card is in your security and your opponent swings at you and it's checked as security, then you activate this ability. So in the case of Sora and Joe, or in the case of the majority of Tamers, that security is just a straight play that card to the field for free, which can be really nice and is pretty great. Now, there are a handful of Digimon that have a security effect, and there are a handful of Tamer cards and option cards that heavily benefit from their security effects and heavily benefit you from the security effects. However, specifically, they are not necessarily what you are necessarily wanting in a situation, or they may not be the best. Some of them have kind of the weak caveat of just going to hand, and most of your Digimon don't have a security effect, so seeing it in your Digimon and your security is basically just a way to kill your opponent's Digimon, or delete your opponent's Digimon is the term we use in this game. So option cards are things that you play during your main phase and are one and done. You play this card and then it goes to your trash. And so you kind of play them, do their effect, and you're done with them after that. And there are some strategies in some colors that allow you to loop and utilize and kind of manipulate that a bit more and more, and kind of get into more how that kind of works. Like I said, most of them have the security effect down here. This one, it just adds it to its hand. This one over here says activate this card's main effect. So that you do this, so security says activate this main effect. The main effect means that you have to play it during if you're playing it from your hand, you have to play it on your turn during your main phase. The security effect means it happens right then and there on your opponent's turn. And that's kind of the gist of what's on the cards and how the cards themselves work from what's really necessary in that regard. So now let's kind of move into kind of a layout of what the field looks like and kind of how the game actually works. Alright, so here I have a 50 card deck that I can shuffle up, just basic shuffling. I can let my opponent cut, and then we can set up and ready to go. I have my 5 Digi-Eggs ready to go here. These sit over here, and your Digi-Egg zone, your deck sits off to the side up here. The first thing you do on your turn, or the first thing you do to begin the game, is you take the top 5 cards of your deck, and you set them over here like this. These are your security cards. They are what we use to determine who has what and who. We use these as our life totals. We use this to determine whether or not we win. The goal is to get rid of all of these on your opponent's side and attack them while they have none. And then you win the game. The only other way to lose is to draw from an empty deck, which is mostly unlikely in this game as there are no true mill effects that really gear toward that kind of strategy. There are ways to get there, and it does happen. Deck outs just kind of rare unless the game drags on an incredibly long time, as some decks actually are designed to do, but that's kind of rude. You put those 5 cards there, you draw 5 cards. These 5 cards are your starting hand, and you look at them and you play with those cards. You don't look at your hand until you've figured out who goes first. You can roll dice. The rules themselves say play rock, paper, scissors. Whoever wins, whatever method of randomization you choose goes first, and then you proceed to play. So I did forget a second ago to pull out a memory gauge, but I got one now. So we have this at the top of the board. This is our memory gauge, and we take whatever item we want to use as a marker. I've got these nice little 3D printed Wargreymon and Black Wargreymon that I like to use. But we place them to start the game on 0. So the player who goes first does not draw a card and has to start with their memory gauge at 0. So if I'm going first, I look at my hand and we go through the phases of the game. We unsuspend phase, not really relevant, nothing's on the field yet. We draw, or not allowed to draw, and then we go into our breeding phase. In our breeding phase is where we hatch an egg. We can either hatch an egg if this zone there's a zone right here, and if that zone's empty, we can hatch an egg. Or, if there's a level 3 Digimon in this zone, we can move this Digimon up. You can only do one of those two things during the breeding phase, and then you move on to your main phase. So during the main phase, I then can do whatever different things I have available to do, as long as the memory gauge is on my side. So, if I have this Starmon, I can Digivolve it for 0 onto my level 2 Pikmon in the breeding area. Whenever you Digivolve a Digimon, you get to draw a card. Which is always nice, especially when you're going first, to be able to have a Digimon Digivolve right away, because, you know, you lose out on that initial draw anyways, and so on and so forth. And so, whenever we play a card to pay a cost, so I play this other Starmon straight to the field, I then move the counter to my opponent's side, 1, 2, 3, and that's the play cost of this card. So now we resolve any effects. If this has an on-play effect, this has an on-play effect, so that effect resolves, and now it passes to my opponent's turn. So the way it turns in is either I say I pass the turn, or the memory gauge goes to my opponent's side of the memory gauge. So I'm at 0, I play this for 3, it's now my opponent's turn. They would go, they would unsuspend their Digimon, they would hatch or move up, and then they would draw a card. And then they would proceed to do whatever they can, utilizing the fact they have access to 3 memory. And so your opponent goes, and you keep doing, they do say they do something for 1, do something for 2, and then they do something for 3, and then that makes it my turn. If you're sitting on 0, the turn remains yours. There are ways to gain memory in this game, and there are ways to lose memory. So there are ways to manipulate it so that you try and get as much done as you possibly can. You want to try and keep your opponent as low as possible. And you can put yourself back to 0. You can even go over, effects will resolve, and you'll go back to 0, so it'll continue being your turn. And that's kind of the name of the game, is turn doesn't pass until all effects have resolved. So doing as much as you can with your memory is kind of that's the resource management in this game. So say we go back to my opponent, they do a bunch of things, they end up putting me at 3 memory. So it's my turn again. I don't have anything tapped, so I don't have to worry about unsuspend. I draw my card for turn. I'm in breeding phase. I can now choose to move this up, or I can leave it back here. As long as it's here, no card can target it. So if an option card says delete this, delete target Digimon, or delete this, or do that, that Digimon can't be targeted. They can only attack those in the active area up here in the battle zone, which is only this Starmon here right now, which gives me incentive to Digivolve all the way up. However, if I Digivolve into something in this zone, effects don't apply. If I have a when Digivolving effect, it doesn't happen, things like that. And so the only benefit, aside from the fact you can't kill it, is that I get to draw my card for Digivolving. And so it can be kind of a hit or miss in that regard. Depends on how your deck wants to run. Some decks just want to sit here and build a huge stack to pull up inheriteds and just win that way. And so they kind of want their guy to stay back until they know it's clear. So there's miscellaneous things like that. I can also, so for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to move up the Starmon to say that that's what I've done during this breeding phase. And so now we're going to move on, and we're going to look at my hand and see, do I want to attack, do something, or do I want to Digivolve, or do I want to do that? So we are now in our main phase, and that covers basically the entirety of the game. And here's where we get into other aspects of the game. We have basically our Digimon have summoning sickness. If we hard play them, they can't attack the turn. So if I played another Starmon here, I would not get to use it. I couldn't attack with it. I could just use its on play effect because that's got nothing to do with it. So that kind of sucks. But that's not the greatest, you know. And our other Starmon, because it was back here and we moved it up last turn and we moved it up, it is okay to attack with it. And another cool thing about this game is we can attack with one, then we can play another card, and then attack with the other in case something happens or anything like that. We attack with one Digimon at a time in this game, so we're not... So going back, that's kind of what I'm going to do here, is I'm going to swing this Starmon at my opponent's security. Obviously, I don't have an opponent standing across from me to demonstrate that. I will use my own security for that purpose right now. So when you swing at your opponent, you flip the top card of... They flip the top card of their security, and you check it. So, say the Starmon was swinging at me, I would flip this Jet Sophimon, and then I would compare the DP in the top corner of this card with the DP in the top corner of this one. Starmon's only 1,000. Jet Sophimon is at 7,000. Starmon would die, and the Jet Sophimon does not have a security effect, and therefore will just go straight to the trash as well. That battle's over. My opponent is now at one less security. And then I would do the same with my second Starmon. I would attack. Happened again. Both of them die. And so on and so forth. Now, in the event that it was the other way around, if the security card flipped was a Starmon and I was attacking with the Jet Sophie, the Starmon would go to the bin and my Jet Sophie would stay. So, just basic rule of thumb, your 7K is bigger than your 1K, and so on and so forth. There's that. So, there's that. Looking at it to see if I have anything in here that'll matter. Alright, so I do have another card in the security right now that we can that shows differently. So if I swung with the Starmon and flipped this Spiral Masquerade on the other hand, it says activate this card's main effect. If I still had the two Starmons out and I swung the first one and hit this card, then they can use this card to use its main effect that says one of your opponent's Digimon gets minus 3,000 DP for the turn. So they can kill my other Starmon, and then I won't be able to check more security, and then they're only out one. And so you can do, with activating the security effect, can do things like remove Digimon from the field and stuff like that. Or in the event of a card like my TK, it can just go to the field. And your Digimon doesn't die if you flip a Tamer or a option card that ends up targeting a different Digimon because there was no actual fight involved. So you just resolve the security effect as it is stated on the card. Some just say activate the main, some say free play, and some say something along, and some say just put in your hand. So like I said, the goal is to attack through and get all their security gone, and then swing at them one more time in order to win. So you might be thinking, okay, so when I attack, do I only attack security? Is that the only time you see a Digimon fight another Digimon? And the answer is no. So the Digimon, if you're looking at a playfield where your opponent with an opponent, and you've got it, so say they have this Jet Sylphimon, and I have this Starmon. If this Jet Sylphimon is untapped, I can't do anything about it, or unsuspended as we use in this game. I'm falling back on lingo of Magic. And for that I apologize. However, so this Jet Sylphimon sits here, it does what it sits here as a 7k body, and if that is the only thing on my opponent's field, I swing the Starmon, I attack them, we check security, and say they hit, say I hit this Tamer, so it just goes to the field, my Starmon lives. What happens now when I do something to go to my opponent's turn? Right? I say, we'll play this effort, we'll hard play this Zephyrmon just to pass the turn. It's now my opponent's turn, they go through the steps. What they can choose to do is now they can attack my Starmon because it is suspended. You can only attack a Digimon directly at a Digimon if Digimon is suspended. Attacking a Digimon does not check security unless your Digimon has the keyword piercing, but in general it doesn't. But it does allow you to remove bodies from your opponent's side of the field to slow them down from continuously attacking you. And that way you can get more bodies, you can set up better, and slow them down, and kind of keep it back and forth to where it's in your favor. And so that's kind of the basics of how the game works. You kind of draw, you pass, you just keep back and forth, playing cards, digivolving, and doing things like that. The key things to remember are that you want to remember to draw when you digivolve. You want to remember to make sure you're actually moving your memory gauge counter as you go, because I know myself, I've done it a lot of times where I've played a card and I was sitting here thinking about what was in my hand more than anything and forgot to move the memory counter. And it became a question of, wait, did I have as much memory, or did I use as much memory as I thought I did? How much do I actually have left? I might be overthinking what's in my hand because I don't have any memory left. And so it's an important thing to do, to check that and do that. And so, the game's pretty much kind of dry at that point. You remember that you attack until all security's gone, and then attack directly. The only way to stop the direct attack when you get to that point, if we get to this point and I have no security and my opponent has this Starmon and they attack me with this Starmon, the only way to prevent myself from losing in this situation is if I had a Digimon that had the keyword blocker on it, in which case if I had a blocker to play here, if I had a blocker in play here, I could tap the blocker to block the Starmon, and so they failed the attack to attack me because I changed the attack to my blocker. And that's the only way to protect yourself when you get to this point. Hopefully you don't have to worry about that because you're either winning the game, you already won the game, or you're not having to worry about your security being that low. But it happens, that's how the game works. We all win some, we lose some, and have fun. And that should be all you need to know in order to play the game, in order to get an idea of the game from the basics. Let me know if there's anything that was unclear or bad about the way I did this and discussed it. And please share if it like and share if it helped you. Like I said, comment. And just go out and have fun, play the game, buy some packs and some starter decks to kind of mess around with stuff. You're not going to know what gameplay feels good until you actually test it. And let me know if you want me to go more in depth into any part of the game, and I'll make videos that have to do with that. If you have a question of something I talked about, I'll make a video talking about that more, so on and so forth, to give you a better idea. And hopefully this was good enough to get your feet wet and enjoy playing the game, find a buddy, and play, and just have fun. Until next time, later.